Conversating? Conversating with Pops and Ade.
Yep. Conversating with Pops and Ade.
Well, I'm Peter J. Harris.
And I'm Adenike A. Harris. And this is Conversating with Pops and Ade.
Conversating with Pops and Ade.
Let's go.
Let's get started. Yep. Number 3. Pops and Ade. Back at it. Conversating together on
Conversating with Pops and Ade.
With Pops and Ade. Episode 3. Wow. Nice. Topic today, everybody. I'm getting real business-like.
I see. Our topic it's so today, dry.
I know. Yes, our topic today.
Yes, hi, welcome to Conversating with Pops and Ade. It's so dry and official.
I can't flow all the time. So, but welcome back to you. Good to see you again. And wow, you're still 3,000 miles away. I'm still 3,000 miles away from you. You're on the East Coast. I'm on the West Coast.
I know. I got big hair today.
Yeah.
I'm channeling your 70s fro. I'm excited.
I got my muscle shirt on. I got my muscle shirt on. Yeah.
Do we have any muscles?
We'll see. Well, we won't see today. So yeah, today's topic is a word that has more dimensions, as we always do, but it's courages. Plural. Courages.
Because why is courage plural?
Because the wiser I get, the more rich my experiences are. It's come to me, frankly, that you need more than one kind of courage in a given situation. I mean, the courage it takes to face down trauma, that's a different kind of courage than the courage it takes to stand up in front of a group of people because you're shy, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm going to invite you to grapple with the plural of courage as we get started on episode 3. What does courages mean for you?
Courages. Outside of it making my brain do like a minor brain fart because you're saying it wrong.
How should I say it?
No, I'm just saying in general, like my brain, the word courages is not grammatically like you're like, the courages it took to do something. My brain is having a mental fart with the actual grammatic incorrectness of it all. But as I'm learning and as I conversate with you all the time, it does make sense to me. So courages to me is really recognizing that no matter what you go through, courage itself is something that you need, but there are different levels of it that you need for different moments in your life. So I think you mentioned already the courage that it takes to confront your trauma. For me, it took a particular type of courage to be able to tell, you and mom about my ex-stepfather, but also to took another level of courage to be able to demand to you two what I wanted. I think that takes a lot of courage because, typically kids don't tell their parents what they want and then expect to be listened to. It took a certain amount of courage for me to go to the police and to trust them, with the history of police and in our culture, it was something that, I demanded that they work for me. And I was one of the blessed people that I actually had a Black male detective who took my statement, came to the house. So it took a lot of courage to do that. It took a particular type of courage, right? So already we're in 3 different courages. It takes also for me what I just experienced. It took a lot of courage to apply to a PhD program. I've been out of school for over 10 years. It took a lot of courage to put my heart and soul into those applications. Then it took another type of courage to get rejected and to be honest and not take it personal. but recognize that, well, maybe it's just not my time to do that. Maybe it's time for me to refine what I want to do and figure out what's next for me. So for me, courage is a way that you look at life and figure out what kind do you need for each particular moment that you are currently experiencing. Last episode you mentioned something about wood shedding, and I talked about being in a cocoon. I think it's an opportunity to reset. I find that what I'm doing right now in my own life is my own version of wood shedding, my own version of cocooning in a sense. And that takes courage because we're in a world where everything is about productivity and what you're producing and what you're creating and what you're putting out there. And it's like, you're not doing one thing, then try to get a job and go do another thing. And it's like, it's taking courage, I think, for me, to be able to sit still and not immediately go jump right back into the workforce and to really ask myself, what do I want to do? I'm in my 40s, getting ready to turn 41. And it's like, well, what do I want to do? I don't want to jump back into the workforce and work for someone else's dreams. I really want to figure out what dreams that I have for myself. And does that include a doctorate degree? And if it does, then how do I get to that? And that takes courage to be able to know what you want, because we live in a world that kind of dictates it for us. I mean, we don't have to be courageous. I'm also learning that it takes courage to speak up and to tell your truth and to be honest with yourself.
Right.
And so these are the multitudes of courages and what that means. And I think that I've walked in these different levels and these different shoes and these different dimensions of courage. And that's why it's like, it's more than one. It's a beautiful integration of multitudes and a myriad of different types of courage,
Something hit me. Courages might also be a synonym for risks.
Healthy, positive risks.
Yes. Our framework remains ethical. And so we're trying to deal with healing and health, or as Sister Aisha would say, accountability. Can I get a can't wait to learn more from her. But I also like this concept of, to me, you need a courage to step outside of your everything, conditionings, patterns, etc. I remember looking back to the deep days right after your disclosure. And then I came down to Atlanta and I went to counseling with you. And, I knew that that took courage, period, to just sort of roll up in there with this person you had already had this relationship with. And then I said to myself, if you're going to do this, you got to go to where the so-called rubber meets the road. And there were certain painful questions that I knew I had to ask, and I had to get the answer. I think I'll hold them in I'll cradle those questions for now, because I don't want the show to veer into a different direction right now. I just know that when I was in that room, it set the standard for a totally different experience in my life. When I remember we were driving, I was going through some real challenges at my job at that time. And I kept hitting a wall. I felt like the person with whom I was working most closely, we just weren't syncing up. And I remember just feeling like I had stopped, but it was old. I could feel that old part of me, that old pattern, the brooder. And I was getting mad, and I was getting ready to go southeast on them, and I was getting ready to cuss, and and I remember asking, I said, what do you think about me going to get some therapy? Remember, I don't know if you remember that. We were in the car, and
I remember.
And you said,
go ahead, tell the people what I said.
You tell them. What did you say? What?
I said go.
Yeah, but you weren't hesitant at all. You just said, yeah, Pops, I think you should. You didn't even know all the details.
Not even a little bit of the details. I think I just knew you were frustrated. I knew that you were going through some things and you had some decisions you wanted to make. But first of all, let's be clear. I'm just excited that you trusted me enough to ask me about going to therapy.
Well,
I'm gonna be honest, and I'm gonna tell this to anybody that ever asked me if you should go to therapy. Understand, Adenike will always say go. Yes. That ain't. I don't care what it is. I'm gonna tell you to go. Yes, of course, go. Like,
yeah, but it wasn't generic. Your response wasn't generic.
No. I'm not saying that my response to you was generic, but I am saying generically, if anyone ever asked me, and the reason is because I believe in the benefit of having someone, and I think I mentioned this in our first episode or second episode of this season. I believe in the power of having someone be unbiased that can hear your side of what you're experiencing and help you manage that. When it came to you as my dad, I know that I spoke more to you. I think I said, well, yeah, if you believe that it'll help you really process these feelings that you're feeling, so that you don't go southeast on them. Excuse me. I think I also was emphasizing that I think it would be a good time for you because you had already experienced some things. Like, is it okay if I share what you experienced when I first moved out there? And
let's put it on. That's worth. Absolutely.
So I know we always talk about like my trauma, right? And I think I want to make sure that people who listen to us understand that the tools and the things and these topics that we discuss are not specific to being sexually assaulted or having the most traumatic experience.
Right.
Dad, we lost his house. He had this house for over 20 years.
No, about 15 years, close, but 15, we was on a roll.
It felt like 20. Yes. It felt like a house that I had grown up in. It was a crooked little house, and it was his house that he had in LA. And when I moved out there in 2011, by the time 2013 came, it was gone. He lost it to foreclosure, and so that was a trauma. Those were things that he had experienced, and then from then. At the time where he was asking me about going to therapy, he had been dealing with financial loss, not being able to get a job in a city that he has lived for. And I know you've lived in LA for at least 20, 30 years.
Since 91. Yeah.
Right. So 91 to 2021, you know how long he's been there. And he struggled to find a job in a city he had been with, in a city that he had planted roots in. And I remember telling him, like, go to therapy because I think it's an opportunity for you to talk through these frustrations that you've been expressing about your finances, not having a job. And at the time, the situation that you were in as a contract employee, you were really trying to do something positive, but it was being met with resistance and you were being so my encouragement to therapy was specific to what you needed at the time, because I saw how it could be a benefit.
Yes.
And that took courage, because it took courage for you to ask your child, number one, and to be transparent, to be like, yo, I think I'm at a crossroads where I need some therapy. And I know that particularly as a Black male, as a Black person, the stigmas that come around it, of course, you can't go to therapy. You've been abused. You've been, sexually assaulted. Like, you go to therapy, you deal with that. But for other things, like, damn, I lost my house and I can't find a job. Right. People don't think that therapy can be beneficial. They don't think that these minor things, but it takes courage to recognize that you cannot handle something on your own. So that for me is one of the courages that I also think that you've modeled, as well as just even asking me for that. Like, you modeled that statement of like, hey, I think I need therapy. What do you think? That takes courage, because you also would show. I think also something's coming to me. Courage is also a part of vulnerability in interpersonal relationships, like not necessarily intimate relationships, but like whether it's a father-daughter, mother-daughter, father-son, siblings, friends. There's a vulnerability with that honesty, and it takes courage to be vulnerable. It takes courage to be honest with who you are, what your strengths and weaknesses are. And I believe that that's also one of the things, like those are one of the courages, and you've modeled that for me.
Oh, cool. Well, that's very inspiring, actually, because 2 or 3 things happened to me while I was listening to you. the word encouragement. Can I get I'm sure it's probably obvious to somebody who's all up into language, but it's right in there. You are you are inviting, I guess, or I don't want to get too deep, but how about encourages is meant? But on the real, the link, courage was the link between attending the therapy session with you back in Georgia with the mighty Dr. Ash. And once I floated the idea by you and asked your thoughts, then the connection I needed to then go to the place was my medical place. And I remember asking first for a therapist of African descent, or at least the dude that they assigned me to was a Latino brother, at least according to his name. Before I could go to the first session, however, that dude transferred out or something. And I wound up with another cat from New York City, Irish dude, tall dude, Dr. R, I'll just call him, and we had a marvelous sequence of conversations. And you're right, because a part of me just culturally and whatever wanted to have a dude, as they now say, who looked like me. Well, light skinned black in this case, but I'm just saying. But in the end, the dude was a cold professional, and he had the right tenor to his vibe. So on one hand, obviously, great listener, what have you. But I always remember one particular session when I was breaking some stuff down. And I mean, of course, he didn't know the situation outside of me telling the story. But he always made me feel like, one, he was listening, and he believed me. You know what I mean? Because I wasn't in there just making some stuff up. Anyway, he just said to me, he said, "I'm gonna tell you something, man." And I'm speaking the way I speak.
He's speaking in Southeast. He
said, I'm gonna tell you something, man. And it's almost like he said, "I'm gonna take my therapist hat off." And he
let me be your homie for a minute.
Yeah, he just looked over his shoulders and ain't nobody in here. I'm certified, but all the public health, public service people ain't in here. He said, "Man, you're right. What you do, what's going on, even if you lying, it's wrong for anybody in a certain situation to have to deal with these things." Anyway, so that's a different kind of courage, because he don't know. I could be an undercover agent as far as I'm concerned.
You could be part of the ethics committee trying to see how he manages his
and I want to make sure I don't disrespect, what he was doing. He didn't like totally say, "Oh, my individual." Yes, brother. No, he just wanted to make sure he let me know that, yes, sir, speak your truth. It's heard here. I have the courage to hear you as a professional. I have the courage to hear you as a human being. And we had, I don't know, maybe 10 sessions. I felt marvelous afterwards, as people who've gone to therapy will testify to. But yeah, for me, the courage part of it was connecting with the two therapy sessions, or the two different therapists over the years, and to get out of my own comfort of just sort of sitting in my brooding energy, Yeah. So courage I think is a valuable, if not an accurate grammatical turn of phrase or word. It's a marvelous, like, dynamic sensibility for me.
Yeah, I agree, and I also, if I want to tag team a little bit into, it also takes courage to advocate for yourself when you have a bad therapist, because one thing that I do want to acknowledge is that every therapist is not the greatest therapist. When you find the one, right? But when you find the one that clicks with you, that you have a rhythm, like what Pops just talked about. But there are some times where you might get a therapist and it might not click for you, because I've heard experiences of people who have gone to therapy and the therapist wasn't a good therapist, or they didn't feel heard, they didn't feel safe, they didn't feel
okay.
It takes a sense of courage within yourself to just advocate, I want a new therapist.
Yes.
Because I think also we forget as the patient, in a sense, that therapist is working for you. You paying them.
Jeez, right. Well, yeah.
So
at the end of
the
time,
you're paying them with
honesty and
time,
testimony
honesty, testimony, but also like your insurance, your money, like
right.
even the basics. If your insurance is paying for this, who paying your insurance? You getting your insurance. Like either way. So the takeaway in this little tidbit is really recognizing, yes, go to therapy, find a therapist and the kind of therapy that works for you, and have the courage to advocate for yourself. If you feel like something isn't swinging, if you feel like something is not, you should not be leaving your therapy sessions feeling like worse than you came in, or feeling that your therapist did not hear what you had to say and they're trying to tell you how wrong of something is. Now, yes, therapists are supposed to hold you accountable. The goal is to help you work through some of your own patterns. So there may be pushback. You might not leave. Trust me, I've had moments where I've left my therapy session and been like, well, why did she make me think about that? But at the end of the day, I never felt disrespected. I never felt, devalued. I never felt as if I was not heard in a session. Now they might have, thrown me like, hey, you know that what you did.
Right.
You right. So I just wanted to kind of leave that little nugget of courage for protecting and advocating for yourself, because I think it goes back to, like, for me, as in my disclosure, I had courage for wanting to stand up for myself. So I want to make sure that that's put out there, because I don't think that all therapists are, the greatest of all greats, because I do know of people who have had negative experiences, and I don't want those people to feel as if I'm not acknowledging, like, it's not always all good. It's just like, but the courage comes from advocating what you need. I mean, even for me, and I'll go back to, I talked about grad school and not getting into the PhD program this particular year, but I also recognize it took courage for me to realize, I could use some more support. So I actually called my therapist and was like, you know what? While I'm woodshedding, while I'm cocooning and finding out what I want, let me go back and do some re-up. Let me go back and, shake some things up
booster
and really
shot.
Kind of, like a booster shot. Like, let me get my shot in my arm to really get me back into a space and a foundation, because yes, I am a different person now than I was when I first started with her. But this new person is so new that I kind of need to talk to her with somebody else to kind of help, because I am in a space that I've never been before, which is beautiful, but it also is very scary. So I'm actually working with her to tap into my courage of being in this space, this new space. So
yes, the courage is to heal, to actually, as Tony said, want to be well, and to then victorize on that wellness.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And really not sit in just the quote unquote intention of wellness, but to actually activate the hunger, the demand, like you said earlier, the demand for wellness, the demand for wholeness, the demand for not retribution per se, but just sort of resuscitation from something that's been smacking you around, or some person who's been smacking you around. So anyway, so I really hope folks are at least sensing, if not like little, because I know we'd be flying all over like fireworks and whatnot. But
like a pinball machine, but it all comes back to the courage. It all comes back to courage.
Courage is plural, because we are more than one person.
Right.
We're more, and circumstances demand, that we be multidimensional. And that's why, for me, courage is the way to go.
I'm gonna drop this little knowledge. I remember and then we can go. I remember when you told me I was going through a really bad breakup, and I remember you was like, "Well, you know what? I mean, here's the reality. I knew this beforehand, but I'm gonna let you date who you need to date. But you ain't from this dimension. You from another dimension. You from the fifth dimension, and he's stuck on the first one." And I was
like, I ain't say that.
Truly, this eat. But to tell y'all, if you ain't in the fifth dimension, don't try to holler at me. But when you said that to me, it was so empowering because you were just reminding me of the levels, of the depths of who I am, and recognizing that I'm not, I'm not one dimensional. I'm multi-dimensional. So, and I think that's what we get at when we talk about courage, is that it's so many different dimensions, and that's what it's for. So,
and I say, it has been proven.
It has been proven. Oh my God! Thank you.
I know you'd be like saying,
"Honey,
come on, courage."
Let me tell you, Pops. When I look back, I'll be like, "Lord, was I?"
Well, I guess that's an excellent place to end today's episode 3 on courage.
Yep, absolutely.
In my humble opinion.
I think so too. Hey, everybody, thanks for listening, and come back next week for episode 4. And we appreciate you listening to Conversating with Pops and Ade. Thanks a lot.
All right, y'all. You've been listening to Conversating with Pops and Ade. We're your hosts, Peter Harris.
And I'm Adenike Harris. Please, wherever you're listening to this podcast, subscribe, share with your friends, and give us feedback. Also, don't forget to follow us at our Instagram page at Pops and Ade, POPSNADE. Facebook, we are Peter and Adenike Harris. And you can also find us on YouTube, where you can see other videos of work that we have done, including our TED Talk entitled Healing versus Retaliation. Thanks again, and come back soon.